In this video, we'll be taking a look at 4 NHL games happening on February 27, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 8 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 4 NHL games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start: if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Vegas Golden Knights versus Washington Capitals. Vegas walks into Washington with the kind of energy you get from a road trip that is going a little too well. 3 straight wins and that wild 6-4 finish over Los Angeles still buzzing in the background. Their season profile looks strong at a glance: a record of 28-16-14, a positive goal differential, and an offense that can flip a game in one shift. It is not just chaos hockey either. The way they limit shots against and wait for cleaner chances feels more like a patient card shark than someone throwing chips at every pot. They give up roughly the mid-20s in shots most nights, lean on quality over volume, and that style usually travels pretty well, especially for a group that has been through plenty of big moments together already. The catch is that the lineup right now feels like it has been held together with tape and patience rather than full health. Several key names sit on injured reserve, including William Karlsson, Brett Howden, Jonas Rondbjerg, Carter Hart, and Alex Pietrangelo, with public timelines that stretch from possibly returning right around this game to much later in the season. That mix affects everything from how many trustworthy centers they can throw over the boards to how comfortable they are defending leads without a full defensive core. Then there is the Jack Eichel wrinkle, his recent scratch after the Olympic break with no clear, widely confirmed upgrade, yet puts his status in that gray zone that handicappers hate. Not ruled out forever, but not locked in for tonight either. All of that adds a little uncertainty to a team that usually feels very stable in big spots, and uncertainty is rarely your friend when you are laying your faith on the road. Washington, on the other hand, has the feel of a team that has quietly remembered who it is. The record sits at 30-23-7, with a strong mark at home where they have banked far more wins than losses and turned their own building into a steady source of points. They have been picking up results with a 6-3-1 stretch, scoring just over 3 goals per game and keeping things tight enough in their own end to avoid a lot of track meets. They do not just fling pucks for the sake of it. Their pressure tends to build as the night goes on, and you can almost feel it in the crowd when they start to hem teams in and feed off the noise. There is also the emotional layer. Alex Ovechkin, sitting 1 goal away from passing Gordie Howe for second most home goals in league history, gives every home game an extra hum, like the whole building is on milestone watch. The roster picture has shifted in interesting ways too. Logan Thompson now wears Washington colors as one of their goaltending options rather than being part of the Vegas story, which subtly changes how both sides manage the crease long term. On the blue line, John Carlson is listed as day-to-day with a lower body issue, and different outlets handle him a bit differently, some calling him out with a target around this date, others simply keeping the uncertain tag. So as of now, he sits in that same cloudy bucket, not confirmed in, not confirmed out, which matters for puck movement and for how confidently they can start plays from the back. Even with that, Washington feels closer to whole than Vegas, especially through the heart of the ice, and that matters when you start thinking about who is more likely to carry momentum over 3 periods. Market-wise, the early numbers paint Washington as a modest home favorite, and the interesting part is that the bigger chunks of money tilt more toward the home side than the raw ticket count does. That pattern usually hints that the more serious bettors lean toward the Capitals, trusting the home edge, the cleaner health picture, and the current form a bit more than the road win streak and the brand name on the other bench. You get a rested home team that has been stacking quiet wins, facing a traveler that just flew across the country, celebrated a chaotic win, and still has key pieces on ice-level limbo. Put all those threads together: the trend line, the building, the injury board, and the way the market is leaning, and a clear favorite to cover its side starts to take shape in a pretty natural way. As our first pick for this matchup, the Washington Capitals money line is our full game side pick. The total sits in that familiar middle range where odds makers basically dare you to choose between a tight goalie duel and a game that tilts into something closer to firewagon hockey. When you strip away the logos and just think in terms of goals for and against, you get two teams that usually live in the neighborhood of 3 goals for and right around 3 against on an average night. Vegas hovers a bit above 3 in both directions. Washington lands a little over 3 scored and just under 3 allowed, and that blend points to games that very often finish with a combined number comfortably above 5. That is not a wild guess. It lines up with how their recent outings have actually played out. Look at the way Vegas games have felt lately. Scores like 6-4, 4-1, 5-2, 4-3, and 3-2 keep showing up, and those add up to totals of 10, 5, 7, 7, and 5. It is not that every game turns into pond hockey, but there is a clear pattern of nights where at least one period opens up and the scoreboard starts working overtime. Washington tells a similar story from a slightly more controlled angle, with recent results of 3-1, 4-2, 2-4, 4-1, and 4-3 in overtime. Those land on combined numbers of 4, 6, 6, 5, and 7, which sits right in that pocket where one extra bounce or one extra power play decides whether a total sneaks over or stays just under. The styles feed that middle to high scoring feel. Neither team is pure run and gun, but both offenses sit in the top half of the league in total goals, with Vegas and Washington each carrying the kind of finishing talent that punishes even small lapses. Washington gets plenty of pucks to the net, averaging close to 30 shots per night, and Vegas does not shoot as often, but makes those looks count with efficient finishing and a knack for turning special teams' chances into momentum. The power play for Vegas has been a real weapon, sitting in the mid-20s in percentage, while Washington's unit sits lower but still dangerous enough that you hold your breath when they set up. Penalty kills on both sides live around the high 70s, which is solid but not airtight, and that combination usually means a couple of man advantage goals are always in play if the whistles come out. The injury and roster context nudges the total picture as well. With William Karlsson, Brett Houghton, Jonas Rondbjerg, Carter Hart, and Alex Pietrangelo on injured reserve by public reporting, Vegas has to stretch its depth a bit more than it would like in the middle, on the blue line, and potentially in net. That can lead to small breakdowns, extra minutes for players a tier down the depth chart, and the kind of late-game fatigue that shows up on the scoreboard rather than in a spreadsheet. On the flip side, Washington's situation around John Carlson adds a bit of a twist. If he plays, the blue line gets an extra playmaker who can spark offense from the point, and if he does not, the defensive structure leans harder on transition and recovery. Either version tends to push the game away from a tight 2-1 grind and towards something with a few more swings, which is exactly what you want if you are looking for goals rather than silence. When you stack all of that together, recent scoring trends, offensive profiles, special teams that can absolutely cash in, and a total line that still sits in that middle band, the picture that forms is one of a game that is more likely to lean into offense than clamp down for 60 low event minutes. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Minnesota Wild versus Utah Mammoth. This matchup in Salt Lake City feels less like a random mid-season road stop and more like a dress rehearsal for spring, a seasoned contender skating into a loud new barn that is still figuring out its personality, and doing it with tired legs and thin air. On paper, the books are still giving Utah a good amount of respect, treating the Mammoth as the clear home favorite while Minnesota shows up as the road underdog. And at first glance, that picture lines up with what most people expect when they glance at the schedule. Utah has been a force at home with a record around 17-9-2 in their own building, and Minnesota is walking in on the back end of a rough back-to-back that rolled through Denver after high-tempo wins over Nashville and Colorado, which is not exactly the spa route. That spot screams tricky for the visitor, and it is the kind of thing casual bettors stare at first. When you pull back from the travel quirks and look at the full season though, the story starts leaning the other way. Minnesota sits around 35-14-10, holding a spot near the top of the Central and quietly acting like one of the league's better road outfits with something like 17-8-3 away from home. Utah, for all its punch, is closer to 30-24-4, which still sounds more like dangerous upstart than Finnish juggernaut. Minnesota lives in that top group in goals per game at roughly 3.3 and rides a power play clicking around 25%, so when they get set up, things escalate quickly. Utah scores closer to league average at a touch over 3 per night, and their power play has been hanging out down in the bottom third, which is not exactly where you want to be against a team that can punish you for every lazy clear. Utah's answer is their shape without the puck and their goaltending, with a goals against number that stacks up among the better units in the league and Karel Vejmelka giving them a real backbone in the crease. Here is the thing, that style is exactly what Minnesota has been poking holes in all year. They pull games away from carefully drawn plans and turn them into long, annoying shifts in your own zone where every breakout feels like a small test you did not really study for. They already carry a scar from this matchup after getting hammered 6-2 at home back in October, when Utah's speed in transition and sharp counter punches made the Wild look heavy and a step slow. Since that night, Minnesota has leaned even harder into mobile puck movers on the back end and a style that connects a high-end power play with a relentless forecheck, and that shows up when you look at their special teams ranking and their goal differential over the long haul. It is almost like they took that loss as a blueprint of what not to be. Utah can absolutely punish lazy shifts, and if Minnesota shows up stuck in second gear, this can flip fast. But when you send at them a team that can score from all three lines, has already proven it can handle hostile rinks, and is still treated like the lesser side in the matchup, you are not just leaning toward a jersey, you are trusting a season's worth of evidence that this Minnesota group has handled these tough buildings better than it is being given credit for. As our first pick for this matchup, the Minnesota Wild moneyline is our full game side pick. For the total, the odds makers are basically hinting that this one might stay relatively controlled, like they trust Utah's structure and Minnesota's tired legs to keep a lid on things. The funny part is that the scoring profiles of these two teams do not really whisper quiet night. Minnesota has been living around 3.3 goals for per game and Utah around 3.19, with both teams allowing under 2.8, so the basic math already points you toward a game where 6 goals sits right in the middle of what feels normal. Stylistically, this looks less like a careful chess match and more like a tug of war for the middle of the ice, where zone entries, speed through the neutral zone, and how crisp the first pass is will decide if things stay tidy or get messy. Minnesota's power play is genuinely dangerous around that mid-20s clip, and they have no problem turning a quiet second period into a shooting gallery if they get a run of whistles their way. Utah's power play has been more modest, closer to the mid-teens in percentage, yet they still manage to get to 3 or more through rush chances and forecheck pressure, especially in front of their own crowd where the energy in the building feels like it gives their legs a little extra bounce. Honestly, if you have ever watched a team feed off a home crowd when they start to string shifts together, you know how fast that can snowball into chances at both ends. Minnesota's penalty kill has been trailing behind league average, which naturally feeds more quality looks for opponents. In games where they are catching plus money, their results have tilted a little toward higher scoring finishes, with the over landing slightly more often than not, which lines up with the eye test of a team that sometimes trades chances instead of clamping things down. Their earlier meeting this season turned into 8 total goals in that 6-2 result, and while that single game does not dictate everything, it does give you a glimpse of what happens when pace picks up and structure gives way to trading punches. Now layer in the simple human part. A tired team at altitude tends to reach, hook, and clutch a bit more, which means more penalties, more power plays, and more scrambles around the crease at both ends. Let me explain why that matters. Every extra special team sequence is another chance for skilled players to tilt the ice toward a higher total, and both of these rosters have enough talent to take advantage when that happens. When you picture how this is most likely to feel in the third period, it sounds more like a 4-3 who blinks last kind of night than a nervous 3-2 where everyone is terrified of making a mistake. So if you have to choose a side on how many goals get scored, leaning toward a game with some real scoring punch makes a lot more sense than sitting there hoping every late empty net look somehow stays out. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Buffalo Sabres versus Florida Panthers. Buffalo rolls into Sunrise with the shinier record on paper, the new money feel in the Atlantic, while Florida still wears the slightly battered but very real identity of a recent back-to-back champion in its own rink. The funny part is that even with that glossy look from the visitors, the market still leans toward Florida at home, which already tells you that raw standings are not the whole story here. Standings show the Sabres at 33-19-6, riding a +20 goal differential and an attack that sits in the top tier of the league in both total goals, sitting around 194, and goals per game. On the other side, the Panthers sit at 30-25-3 with a negative goal differential and a spot closer to the bottom of the division, still getting some respect from those 2 recent cups rather than from this season's scoreboard alone. Recent form sounds like it should shove you straight toward the dog, because Buffalo has gone 7-2-1 in its last 10, while Florida has played almost perfectly average at 5-5-0, and most people scrolling box scores on SPN or the NHL app would stop right there. Here is the thing, the numbers underneath the surface tell a different story about who is more likely to handle the spread in this matchup. Buffalo scores about 3.34 goals per game and allows around 3.05, which looks strong. Florida sits closer to 3.02 goals for and 3.33 against, which on its face feels weaker, yet a major predictive model that weighs shot quality, goaltending, and matchup context still spits out something close to a 62% win probability for Florida in this exact spot, with slightly higher expected goals on their side of the ledger. It feels odd at first glance, but that is exactly what good models do. They drag you away from the obvious surface story. Home and road splits add a little more color to who is better set up to cover. Florida at home sits at 15 to 13 to 3, which is basically the definition of middle of the pack, not some fortress where nothing bad ever happens. Buffalo on the road sits at 16 to 11 to 3, which is solid, but it is not the kind of record that screams unstoppable juggernaut either, more like a good team that still has to grind for results when it gets away from its own crowd. So you get this subtle contrast, a home team that is average in its own building and a road team that is good but not bulletproof, and the edge is small but still tilts toward the group with last change and familiar boards. Stylistically, the matchup leans into Florida's comfort zone when it comes to spread outcomes. The Panthers hit more, take more penalties, and pull games into that greasy, chaotic rhythm where big bodies, habits, and structure matter more than pure skill. They average notably more hits and more penalties per game than Buffalo, while Buffalo prefers a cleaner, more efficient, skill-driven style that looks great when it is flowing but can get bogged down when the game turns into a wrestling match along the walls. Anyone who watched Florida's recent playoff runs knows that kind of night suits them, and it often tilts close games by a goal or two, which is exactly where spreads live. Head-to-head, this is already the fourth meeting of the season, and the broader recent sample still has Florida at 4-1 at home against Buffalo. Even with that, the Sabres have taken 2 of the 3 most recent clashes, including that 5-3 upset in this same building earlier in the month, which gives Buffalo backers something real to point to. Advanced projections, though, still lean toward Florida stabilizing on home ice after that choppy stretch, which lines up with the idea that the more physical, playoff-tested side holds a slight but meaningful edge in a spread context, even if the other team has the prettier season-long stats. Honestly, all the Buffalo is the better team this year talk holds up if you only look at top-line numbers. But when you mix in home ice, matchup style, recent head-to-head, and model-based probabilities as of February 27, 2026, the gap between perception and expectation tightens and nudges this from coin flip underdog toward short favorite with a real chance to cover. As our first pick for this matchup, the Florida Panthers money line is our full game side pick. Now the total is where this matchup starts to feel like a roller coaster instead of a chess game, and that is not an exaggeration given how these two play. Both teams bring the kind of energy that tends to light up the scoreboard rather than grind it into a 2-1 slog, and you can feel that just from watching a few minutes of their games on a random weeknight. On the season, if you just add up goals scored and goals allowed, Buffalo games are coming in at a little over 6.1 total goals on average, with about 3.34 scored and around 2.78 given up. Florida games sit just above 6 total goals per night, with roughly 3.02 going in their favor and about 3 ending up behind their own goalies. When you hear those numbers out loud, you can almost picture the scoreboard operator staying busy most nights. Home and road environments turn that up another notch. In Sunrise, Panthers home games have produced 191 total goals across 31 dates, which lands around 6.16 per game. Buffalo's road schedule has also seen 191 total goals, but in just 30 games, which works out to about 6.37 per night. So when you put those together, you get an environment that naturally leans toward more scoring, not less, especially when one team likes to play in the muck and the other has the talent to turn mistakes into quick strikes. This particular matchup has already shown its personality on the scoreboard. The first 3 meetings finished 3-0, 4-3, and 5-3, which means 2 clear games that sailed into higher scoring territory and 1 extreme under that basically required a shutout to land that low. That is a classic hockey pattern, plenty of chaos around a single tight result. Florida's style is pretty much a friend to higher totals. They hit hard, they stir things up, and they take around 5 penalties per game compared to Buffalo's roughly 3.5. That means more special teams minutes, more broken structure, and more chances for skill to show up in open ice. They have already seen higher scoring tickets cash in 4 of their last 5 overall and in 17 of their 32 home dates, which fits the story of a team that does not exactly slow games down. Buffalo brings a top 10 offense that does not need a ridiculous shot count to score, which makes every little stretch of space dangerous. Florida brings a defense sitting near the bottom third of the league in goals against and a team save percentage in the high .88 range, and that kind of number is basically a welcome mat for opposing shooters. If you have ever watched a game where every decent shot feels like it might sneak through, you know the vibe that creates. A data-driven projection model that simulates this exact matchup lands the median combined expected goals around 7.4 and gives roughly a 64% chance that the game clears the posted number, which is a technical way of saying this projects to be a track meet more often than not. Yes, both penalty kills are legitimately strong and can stomp out a few power plays, and that is the one thing that can hold totals back here and there. Still, when one side plays hyper-physical, penalty-heavy hockey and the other brings a fast, efficient attack that has already shown it can hang a crooked number on this opponent in this building, you are swimming against the broader shape of the matchup if you lean toward a lower scoring script. So even with the usual hockey randomness, like a hot goalie night or a whistle pattern that never quite materializes, the blend of this season's scoring rates, home and road scoring environments, recent head-to-head results, hidden penalty profiles, and model projections updated through February 27, 2026 all point in the same direction, toward a game that is more likely to open up than to stay bottled. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Winnipeg Jets versus Anaheim Ducks. Anaheim has been treating home ice like a velvet rope club lately, and Winnipeg is the latest guest trying to talk their way past security. The Ducks are sitting in that solid, confident zone with a record around 31-23-3, and that 6-game home heater is not just a cute streak, it is a real thing that settles a team down and lets them play to their strengths. Winnipeg comes in more scuffed up at about 23-26-8, the kind of record that tells you they have had to grind for every point and have eaten their fair share of frustrating nights. The schedule spot leans toward Anaheim too, because Winnipeg just went through an overtime battle up in Vancouver, then had to haul themselves down the coast, while the Ducks stayed in the same building, handled that wild win against Edmonton, and got to sleep in their own beds with the same locker room waiting for them. You can feel the difference between a team that lives at the rink for a week and a team that is living out of hotel bags, especially when the crowd starts buzzing early and every little bump on the boards feels heavier for the visitors. The styles do not really match either, and that usually favors the team that gets to dictate the script in front of their own fans. Winnipeg tends to live in that tighter lane, with games that land in the 2 or 3 goal range on each side, the kind of steady pace that keeps scores respectable but rarely turns into a track meet. Anaheim is much more comfortable in a higher tempo rhythm, with more offense going both ways, more shots, more swings of momentum, and more stretches where the game feels a little chaotic but oddly familiar to them. Add in the fact that Winnipeg's blue line has been dealing with regulars who are either out or banged up, plus the question mark around their star goaltender's health, while Anaheim's injuries are more about depth pieces and backup support, and you get a pretty clear picture of which bench feels sturdier right now. When the home team is in rhythm, the crowd is behind them, the visitors are nursing tired legs, and the perceived edge is still priced like a modest gap rather than some massive mismatch. It points to backing the side that owns last change and the comfort of a building where they have not been losing much lately. As our first pick for this matchup, the Anaheim Ducks money line is our full game side pick. The total here is all about mood, tempo, and how both coaches want this thing to feel after their recent runs. The number that has been set is basically a challenge. It is like the market saying, go ahead, expect a shootout, and that might sound tempting when you think about how Anaheim usually plays. Their season story has been offense-friendly, with more goals for, more goals against, and more shots in general, the kind of profile that has produced a good chunk of overs in this same building. Winnipeg, though, has leaned toward a lower event identity, and their recent stretch has tilted even more in that direction, with most of their last 10 games landing on the quieter side of the scoring spectrum. When a team under that kind of standings pressure shifts into a more structured mode, you get fewer big breakdowns, less trading of rush chances, and a lot more simple plays off the glass that do not show up in highlight reels but definitely show up on the scoreboard as missing goals. Anaheim just came out of that wild 6-5 roller coaster against Edmonton, and that kind of game is fun for fans but not usually the template coaches want to repeat right away. The usual rhythm after a night like that is a few days of video clips that are not very flattering for the defensive group, a lot of reminders about details, and a message that boring can actually be beautiful when you are trying to protect a home streak and build a a playoff push. Winnipeg's situation on the back end nudges things in the same direction from the other side, because when your defense is thinned out and your main goaltender is not 100%, the easiest fix is to make the ice feel smaller. Forwards come back a little deeper, defensemen avoid risky pinches, and the whole road game plan is built around shrinking chances against, even if it means accepting fewer rushes the other way. Put all of that together and you get something that smells a lot more like a playoff-style chess match, where every mistake feels expensive and both sides are subconsciously tapping the brakes on chaos, rather than a repeat of that loose back-and-forth circus against the Oilers. As our second pick for this matchup, the under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.